What is an INFJ? These four letters stand for introverted, intuitive, feeling, and judging in the Myers-Briggs personality typing system, which was based on the psychologist Carl Jung's theory of the cognitive functions. An INFJ is someone who prefers to use the cognitive functions introverted intuition, extroverted feeling, introverted thinking, and extroverted sensing, roughly in that order of frequency, and we'll get into what each function does a bit later. But first, you've probably heard that the INFJ is wise, deeply perceptive, empathetic, visionary, and humanitarian. In reality, any type may possess those characteristics, while an actual INFJ might not. Why? Well, because those are personality traits, which are characteristics that can change over time and can be consciously developed. Think of it as the content of personality. The content can change depending on what you put into it, which may include culture, upbringing, personal experiences, and so on. Carl Jung was not focusing on personality traits, but personality types, a classification system that does not change over time. Since it is fixed, it has to offer enough flexibility to account for the variations within, the variation being the diverse content of personality traits. So think of personality type as the structure that is capable of containing a variety of content. Certain structures may tend to lead to certain content, but correlation does not equal causation. So what is this structure? In short, it's your system of information digestion. It's how you tend to perceive, retain, organize, and prioritize information. This is denoted by your cognitive functions. At no point should these cognitive functions be confused with universal, biological, and executive functions like the five senses and planning for the future. The INFJ's dominant function is NI. NI is a perceiving function, governing how one observes and retains information, which means that the INFJ, despite the J, actually prefers P, perception, the observation of information rather than information prioritization. As an introverted type, they spend a lot of time observing their personal visions and their inner world, and may neglect or spend much less time being attuned to the external world, whether that's to sensory delights, other people, or external rules. Now, this may come as a bit of a surprise to some observers of more socially extroverted INFJs, since they often handle social situations with grace and finesse, or simply have a lot of places to be and people to see. But despite the number of social obligations, the INFJ actually spends most of their psychological time looking inward at their personal understandings through NI, which is vague and overarching, focusing on the big picture rather than specific instances. Being an intuition function, NI focuses on what's not concretely there. So not the chair and the table and the room, but perhaps why they're there. Maybe we're expecting guests. The unspoken meaning and intentions behind the concrete facade. Being introverted, NI subjectivizes these elements. In order to make sense of all the conceptual information, it forms patterns and trajectories. Sometimes NI plays with themes thanks to its visual nature, but I think most notably, NI maps out cause and effect relationships, linearly tying together time. Being their strongest function, they naturally see patterns and trajectories even in limited bits of concrete information. This is because their understandings are usually deep and far-reaching, that is, connecting all facets of their life and knowledge to a single pattern, theme, or purpose. This provides a backdrop against which new information is highlighted, then amalgamated. NI finds where new information fits within the bigger picture. So as you can imagine, if the INFJ encounters new info that's completely contradictory because their previous understanding was inaccurate, that can be a rude awakening. It can take some time for NI to recalibrate or upheave itself. Occasionally, more immature INFJs will even turn a blind eye to the contradictory information or fail to perceive it altogether, since it's not what they were expecting. With all that said, most of the time, NI is quite accurate and useful, giving the INFJ correct inklings and visions of how things will progress, a glimpse further down the timeline. NI likes to coalesce information, holding on to patterns and conclusions while the details get lost. So often, the INFJ will intuitively know what will happen or how something works, but have trouble delineating the exact mental process that led them to such a conclusion. Basically, while concrete information and personal experiences do all enter and gradually shift NI perceptions, the concrete information or instance itself is not internalized. As an internal and conceptual function, the contents of the NI mind is intangible and hard to articulate. Most high NI users report having something akin to visions or inklings that are difficult to explain. I want to compare the INFJ to the INTJ a bit because I think there's kind of a stereotype that goes like somehow the INTJs and I will pick up chess moves and is a mastermind, and all of the business world is a chessboard, knowing which stocks to buy, etc., while the INFJs and I is somehow more like an oracle, knowing which relationships will stand the test of time and who will break up, knowing how you feel deep down before you even realize it yourself. I mean, they are very different types, but it's not thanks to their NI. Being the dominant function in both types, their NI basically has the same functionality, and if anything, those characters fit the ENTJ and ENFJ archetypes a bit better. Both of our NI DOMs are very in their heads, cerebral, all-encompassing, and from my NE's point of view, serious. Serious because life has weight and meaning and trajectory. Their NIs just seem different because these types feel so different to us, thanks to their auxiliary and blind spot functions. Despite both having dominant NI, INFJ and INTJ are not lookalikes. If you look into socionics, the lookalike of INFJ is actually ISFJ, which makes sense to me because both of them are just enveloping you into the warmth of their FE. I wanted to mention it because it seems like a lot of people are torn between INFJ and INTJ, and I get that that's very confusing on the inside, but it should be fairly simple to ask a third party if you're enveloping them or slapping them with TE while having FE polar. So yeah, they're perceiving in the same way, but doing external things differently. They're not perceiving in different modes. Okay, rant over. Now let's talk about what the INFJ is not. They actually enjoy the bit of predictability that allows them to know how something will unfold. They like looking at things in a complex but singular way, thus they do not generally appreciate exploring multiple contradictory scenarios that seem to have nothing to do with how one should realistically interpret something. Now, a lot of people get confused here because they think about contingency planning. While NI is great at contingency planning because of its natural aptitude for patterns, they're able to speedily assess the multiple most likely outcomes of a situation and perhaps prepare accordingly. I'm more talking about random thoughts like, what if my whole team gets eaten by a shark? Generally, they do not like to dwell on such ideas that do not have any external applicability or relevance. Compounding all of this is the INFJ's other introverted function, TI. TI is a judging function, using internal lines of logic and reasoning to create a consistent framework of the world, or of whatever particular field or system the TI user is considering. It took me years to understand TI, and I still don't understand it in my heart of hearts, but now I have some words to describe it with. Okay, unlike TE, which structures the external world based on objective information, TI structures the internal world, also based on objective or impersonal information. Since it's internalized, it's abstracted, like all introverted functions. It's no longer primarily about external, tangible goals, like meeting a deadline or building a website. It's primarily about the abstract and intangible logical processes that occur in the mind. It's the principles and frameworks behind the code of the website, for example. TI isn't very strong in the INFJ, so their personal lines of reasoning through which they view and judge the world aren't the most developed or nuanced. So the one thing the INFJ might not be so great at predicting is their own logical evaluations. In the emotional heat of the moment, they might think one thing or think that they think one thing, only to realize that they think something else entirely later on, or once they've distanced themselves away from a situation. However, over time, the INFJ's TI does get stronger, especially as parts of it get entangled in NI. That is, they'll eventually see patterns of logical principles and their interactions just like in any other parts of life, and start getting NI hunches of how and why things work. NI then lends confidence and certainty to their own lines of reasoning, which is perhaps related to the sage stereotype of the INFJ. Interestingly, lower TI combined with the nebulosity of NI makes it difficult for the INFJ to articulate or explain their reasoning in expected ways, often making their discourse rather vague. Many INFJs show surprising depth of understanding in certain fields, even when they don't fully grasp every logical nuance. Unfortunately, this means that they may occasionally get stuck in a self confirming loop and overlook logical perspectives that contradict their own. Together, NI and TI make up the INFJ's unique inner world. They create the vast sense that everything is connected and intuitively meaningful, which is strengthened by their personal yet impartial evidence. This makes the INFJ very likely to stay steadfast on a path that makes sense and is important to them for long periods of time, giving them their patience and composure. Since their logical judgment is weak in the first place and all of it is busy orienting inwards, the INFJ can be seriously unaware of external logical rules and structures. This problem is actually compounded by strong FE, which I'll explain shortly. FE is the INFJ's first and most active point of contact with the outside world. FE is a judging function, so it has to do with how the INFJ prioritizes information and makes decisions. Being extroverted, it looks outwards at other people's feelings, or at least their external emotional display, that is, their facial expressions, the tenor of their voice, and so on, as well as the communal emotional atmosphere and the group's emotionally driven norms and values. Being extroverted, it doesn't retain consistent emotional preferences beyond external applications. Without such a foundation, FE tends to adapt more quickly, using external emotional expressiveness and impact as a means to an end. This is why there are some stereotypes of the FE user being some sort of sinister manipulator, but I think this stems from a poor understanding of FE. Just as TE has logical end goals like raising the bottom line, FE has emotional end goals, that is, simply conveying and creating emotions like happiness, sadness, harmony, etc. So if you want to convey that you're happy, sure, you can say that you're happy, you can write a poem, but arguably the most direct and efficient way of communicating that you're happy is with a smile, perhaps excitement in your voice. After all these years of observing FE users and FI users, the only consistent thing I found is that FE's external emotional display is congruent with their verbal content. So if they're talking about something sad, they'll sound sad, unless they're being sarcastic. For FI users, not so much. They can talk about something sad and feel sad, but not sound sad. I explained all of this to debunk the stereotype that FE people are happy-go-lucky and harmonious all the time. Rather, the key word is congruence. Their emotional display can easily be congruent towards a more negative goal, like disrupting a group, for example. And the higher your FE, the more intensely you'll tend to express your emotions and impact the emotional atmosphere. Being a stronger function, the INFJ communicates with the world through shared feelings in a warm and convivial manner. Speech usually contains a decent amount of emotional padding, often resulting in the tone or implicit meaning being more important than the content or explicit meaning. They may have a more difficult time dealing with more blunt and business-like TE communication style, which is no doubt partly why the INFJ's conflicting type is the ESTJ. When it comes to external logical rules, structures, and procedures that have nothing to do with human values, the INFJ has a hard time adapting, especially when these things also have nothing to do with their internal lines of reasoning. When it comes to systems and processes, they are much more likely to look inwards and figure out their own way of doing things rather than conform to external and seemingly arbitrary rules. Drifting in the internal world is often so natural that left to their own devices, the INFJ may forget to use FE without prompting, even though their FE is rather strong. FE is prized for its social wherewithal, and so is the INFJ. Combined with their strong NI, INFJs shine when forming or participating in communities that are working towards a grander purpose. The INFJ is attuned to external values when the occasion calls for it, but unlike the ENFJ, they're able to easily disengage from the external world at large and retreat into their NI and TI abstractions. While their social personas might be civil and communal, what's going on inside may be a different story entirely. Even though the INFJ is great at connecting with others, they often forget their gift of empathetic idealism in the living of day-to-day life. The INFJ may be stuck in some detached perspectives and critical beliefs. Most of this may be harmless, but anything too cynical would really benefit from occasionally opening up to FE interactions. Any kind of function is a double-edged sword. Because the INFJ is quick to soak up external emotions, it can be hard to settle on consistent principles based on their personal feelings. Thus, it's possible to go along with what others want only to realize that wasn't what they wanted themselves. However, this problem is greatly mitigated by NI. Thanks to its pattern-seeking nature, the INFJ can usually predict their own emotional response, but they can still be derailed by other people's emotional arguments. Another thing tying the INFJ down to practical real-world affairs is their inferior function SE. SE is a perceiving function, experiencing the world as concrete, immutable externalities. Immutable not because things can't be changed, you can smash a rock, but it'll still be a smashed rock. This is in contrast to SI, which has a subjective interpretation of the rock, over time creating a subjective image of an ideal or standard rock in the mind's eye. To SE, this particular rock is this particular rock. Being extroverted, it doesn't retain anything, so there's no sense of certain objects being out of place. There's no sense of this rock or this food or this movie not fitting in with others in its category. Each sensory experience is perceived in the here and now in its own right. Although SE is the INFJ's weakest function, it shouldn't be underestimated because the weakness of the inferior function usually creates an insecurity, a preoccupation. Repression leads to fixation. Many INFJs have a love-or-hate relationship with SE. On one hand, they're afraid to use it since the messiness of real life always has a way of disrupting perfect cerebral visions. On the other hand, when life isn't working out so well, their lack of SE is the first thing they blame. Many INFJs have experienced the bitterness of missing out on things because they were too busy focusing on their one vision to pay attention to all the other things that life has to offer. Sometimes NI is quite constraining, as anything extraneous can seem like a major deviation from the one path. If only they could get out of their heads and be a bit spontaneous. But then they wouldn't be INFJ. This is not to say that INFJs cannot perceive the present concrete reality. On the contrary, many thoroughly enjoy, and some even to the point of obsession, certain aspects of sensory life, be it decadent food, booze, extreme sports, music, and so on. However, outside of a few chosen sensory indulgences, when we're talking about day-to-day living, the INFJ almost always gravitates towards the conceptually meaningful rather than the sensorially exciting. Insecurity often leads to overcompensation. Ironically, they may even criticize other people for perceived insufficiencies in the SE realm, for example, pointing out concrete things that others fail to observe. Unless the INFJ is under a lot of stress, this usually only happens with topics that are relevant to their NI. Because the concept is so clear to them, the concrete evidence also becomes highlighted, and when other people fail to see what's quote-unquote obvious, it reminds the INFJ of their own tendency to miss certain concrete info, prompting the attack. Furthermore, conscious attention towards real-world factors in an attempt to manifest their ideas can sometimes make them come across as a sensing type, but be not fooled. Generally, they're only fleshing out the sensory to pave way for NI's unfolding. Another way the INFJ may overcompensate is by exploring SE after lending it some NI importance. An example might be suddenly focusing on beauty and aesthetics because NI has tied it to a greater theme of the importance of first impressions and being taken seriously. But despite all that sensory effort, if someone spontaneously asks them to go rock climbing, they'll still be very likely to say no. With time, they'll be able to strengthen their SE, but it'll still follow the lead of NI. Okay, hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Now I'm supposed to give my personal thoughts about the INFJ. I hope you guys enjoyed that video. Some of you probably noticed that I had a order that I wanted to go in, but clearly the order got disrupted because, yeah, everyone was like requesting INFJ and INTP. Basically, I gave in. I didn't have to do it like in the order that I wanted to. But partly why I didn't want to do the INFJ until later is that I don't really know any INFJs. Like, I have 0 INFJ friends. And that's not because I don't like want INFJ friends. Like, I feel like I've only met 1 INFJ like ever. Yeah, and then I met her in Toronto, and now I no longer live in Toronto. So like, yeah. And I only like met her once. I did this video kind of like, okay, trying to imagine like an INTJ mixed in with an ENFJ, or trying to imagine an ENFJ mixed with an ISFJ, because I do know those people in real life. Also, I remember working with Pukoki. She is an INFJ. Yeah, so I was just trying to like amalgamate all of these people together, and then I was like, do I know any fictional INFJs other than like Yoda? Not really. I don't even really like watch Star Wars either. So I tried. I made a list to remind me. So I think that they're quite mysterious, but probably not mysterious by default. Like, it's not like they are mysterious to everyone. It's mostly just to me because they're very opposite from me. So like all opposite kind of functions plus opposite kind of modes, because they're judgers. So they have high JE, I have low JE. They are also a dominant perceiver with their NI. I'm a dominant judger with FI. So like everything is different, plus the kind of functions are different. So yeah, it's a lot of things that are different. So one thing that I noticed is that I have kind of hard time reading the writings of INFJ people. I think that's a combo of like blind TE and the opposite functions thing. Like, they'll write a whole essay. Same thing with ISTPs, but yes, both of those types. The introverted beta quadra types, I'm just like, okay, so I have to read the essay like 4 times to kind of understand what they're getting at. Yeah, that's not really a criticism that you guys are too deep for me. I actually wonder if INFJs, if you have the same impression of INFPs, like, do you just think that we're just like la 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 la, like talking and smiling and laughing, and like you have no idea at the end of the day, you have no idea what point we're trying to make? Because I kind of feel that for INFJs, like it's hard for me to understand their point at the end of the day. In a positive light though, they're not as overwhelming to me personally as the ENFJ. So with the ENFJ, NI is very intense and FE is very intense, and being extroverts, they're just very intense, and yeah, sometimes I feel a little bit awkward. And no, I'm mostly like, I don't think they're awkward. I think I'm awkward. And it feels awkward because I'm like afraid that they are perceiving me as like awkward. I don't want them to be like, oh, look at that INFP, she's so uncomfortable, it makes me uncomfortable. Yeah, like that's what I am afraid of when it comes to ENFJs. So that energy I get less from an INFJ, because like if there's an awkward silence or whatever, I know they have like a world going on. Like, and not that the ENFJ doesn't have their internal world, but I know that they can just easily detach from me and go into their own world. Moving on, I think that they're graceful, like socially graceful. Probably this is not going to apply to everyone, of course, like not... that's why I try to not say these things in the video. I try to say like they tend to be blah blah blah. But yeah, the INFJs I've met, I think Pukoki is very socially graceful. It ties in with the mysterious thing. I think they don't overshare. I think that's the complete opposite of me. I overshare all the time, and I think INFJs, they might be like one of the types that are least likely to overshare. Maybe INFJ and ISFJ for different reasons. I find them to be very serious and purposeful people. Yeah, like it doesn't necessarily mean that all of their goals and aspirations are serious. Like I know everyone has frivolous, quote unquote, frivolous interests. I really hate labeling things as frivolous or deep or whatever. Um, yeah, everyone has all sorts of interests, but the INFJ has a serious vibe. To me, their vibe is like super serious, grounded, and purposeful. Like their energy is so stable. It's like they want something, or they're, it's not even want. Yeah, like I feel like my wanting, like FI wanting, a desire is so volatile, but theirs is so steady. It's like if I'm like this wave or like this, yeah, it's like tidal wave or whatever. Like I'm just imagining INFJ being like the deepest pond that's just completely undisturbed by everything that's going on, and they have that vision. Yeah, that vision that they're just sinking towards or moving towards. I don't know. So one last point is that I think they're very perceptive. Yeah, they seem to really just know things. Yeah, no, seriously, like they just like if I confide in an INFJ about, and this actually did happen, but if I confide in them about my personal relationships, I just explain what happened, it seems like their insights into it are like better than mine, even though they weren't really part of the relationship. Yeah, so that's kind of scary. I mean, no, it's not scary. It's cool. And yeah, it's a little bit like, whoa, impressive and scary and impressive. uh, yeah, I think it's just too hard to get to know INFJs. I I said that I know ENFJs in real life, but I still can't. I don't think I've gotten close to any of them. Yeah, I have not. I know. So I think like the betas and the deltas, it's just really hard to get close to them. Do you guys feel the same way about INFPs? Because it's funny because a lot of people would probably say that INFJs and INFPs, like NFJ, they make the best of friends. But I've just never met my INFJ person. Or maybe I did, but then I moved away. Maybe like all INFJs just move out of Edmonton because it's kind of like it's not a very enough city. Let's put it that way. Okay, yeah, so that is it. If you made it this far, congratulations. That's like it's like a super long video, but I have really good news. So I'm sure you guys have noticed that I haven't been posting videos as often. I know I mentioned it at some points, but I was working on a typing course, like a kind of typing course using like the empirical things that I've noticed, the subconscious visual and auditory cues, and I'm done. Yeah, I'm finished. You can now sign up for like the beta testing thing. I don't know what else to call it. Like Alan calls it that, but it just sounds it sounds a bit cheesy, but I also don't know what else to call it. Yeah, okay, so you can check that out on my website, empiricalpersonality.com. What a mouthful. Yeah, I guess what you need to know about the course is that it's based on the subconscious cues, visual and auditory, and it is like 99% based on the volunteers that I've typed like in my home and the clients that I've typed who have opted in. So it's almost no celebrities. I just feel like people have an emotional connection with celebrities, and it makes the teaching like really difficult because people have really strong beliefs about the types of celebrities. Yeah, so I'm just using everyday people. And that's all I'm gonna say about the course for now, because this video is probably like super long, but I'll make a designated video about the course next week if you're interested in that. Yeah, okay, that's it. I still have my typing service if you want me to type you. And I hope everyone is doing well during this pandemic. It's so extended, isn't it? It's like so long. Oh my gosh. I hope everyone is doing well. I really do. And thank you for watching my videos and being patient. Well, okay, the other thing is I can start uploading videos more regularly now that I've finished the course. I mean, the course is going to be ongoing. I have to keep I plan to keep adding to it like every week, but the bulk of it is done, so I can actually post videos regularly now. Okay, thanks for watching. Bye.